My name's Sarah Bowman. I'm an alcoholic. I work at Mimi Blue on Mass Ave, and I am a server bartender there. So I started in restaurants doing prep as a teenager, um, and then moved over to service when I was 21 and able to get a liquor license. So I've been waiting tables for 14 years.
And how long have you been sober right now? And how long have you been exploring sobriety?
I've I've been sober since November 19th of 2021, and weirdly, looking back on it, I don't think I really explored sobriety before that. Like it wasn't a thing that I didn't think I had a problem. So it was just me like trying to control my drinking and my usage up until then. So up until I actually got sober, that was when the real effort actually started.
S- So November
19th
19th
of 2021.
was that the day when you're like, I've got a problem, I got to figure this out? What does that look like, identifying the problem?
So that day was a day that I woke up in the hospital um, from an overdose. And there was a very specific set of circumstances that happened with some of my friends. Andrew actually is one of them that through doing a wellness check is the only reason that I lived. Um, and I don't know exactly what happened in that hospital room still, but something changed. And I think I made a decision to live. And so, and then previously, like working up to that, there were lots of bottoms, I guess you would call it, things that I probably should have been a good indication that I needed to quit drinking, like broken bones, seizures while I was at work, things like that. But it just like didn't occur to my brain that was suffering from a disease that I had a problem.
So they did a wellness check. Was that like common to do wellness checks, or what inspired that?
Not up until then. It started, I think what had happened was I had called one of my friends, and I was talking to her, and then I became unresponsive on the phone. And she reached out to Andrew, who had already also been trying to get in touch with me and hadn't been able to. So that's kind of what started it. Yeah, it was alcohol combined with, it's not a benzo, but it's a pill that would suppress my central nervous system. So, and I didn't take it intent. I don't think I was suicidal. Uh, but it was okay if I died, if that makes any sense. And I was just I took an overwhelming dose of trazodone to just calm my anxiety that, doesn't go away when you're in the kind of DTs that I was having because my body relied so heavily on insane amounts of alcohol just to not die. I mean, like 3/5 a day kind of alcohol.
You know, you had said after Andrew and I talked that this is deeper than you realized, and Jesus Christ, thank you for sharing. You share your story with such strength, and we had talked about where the wound is, where the light enters. When did you find that strength in your story, in your sober story, and you know?
I also I'm a fan of Brene Brown as well, and I early on learned the concept of real courage doesn't exist without vulnerability. And it wasn't like I set out to just be vulnerable. It just kind of happened because, over the course of 15 years of active addiction, a lot of shit builds up. And just needed to kind of express it and tell my story to people. And when I ended up in recovery rooms with other people that were doing the same thing, you know, I felt right at home. And it was kind of put succinctly, I don't remember, I think maybe about 6 months of sobriety, I was listening to a woman speak about how it doesn't matter how bad things get for me or how terrible, you know, a certain event in my life is, if I can look at it, because I've made it through 100% of my bad days, right? Or I wouldn't be sitting here. So if I can do that, then everything that I experience can be turned into something that could benefit someone else. If I make it through these hard things and I'm willing to share and talk about it, maybe someone else who is experiencing the same thing doesn't have to suffer so long. I say the way I describe my active addiction is it was there was a spiritual death that had occurred at some point in my life, and I just was completely cut off from my spiritual connection to myself and the world around me for a lot, like decades. And as soon as I got sober, there's this sort of spiritual awakening that has happened and continues to happen. And my spirituality is morphing and every day. But I think in the way that the spiritual awakening has translated now is it's not about me anymore. And the fact that I was willing to let myself die and not see the negative, you know, impact that would have on the world was just totally selfish. And today, you know, I get to help people. And most days for me, that's just as simple as just talking about it, just talking freely and openly about everything that has happened to me, everything that I have done to myself, you know, just being really open about, you know, mental health and, you know, being in recovery. Most recently, it's been disordered eating. That's been real fun. But yeah, I think the most integral moment that changed everything for me in my addiction that was already there, but certainly got worse after my mom died when I was 24 years old. And then within a year and a half, my little sister had overdosed. She was 23 years old when she passed away. And that was my family. And they were all gone. And I think I wish that I could go back and talk to that Sarah, that 24-year-old Sarah, and just comfort her and just tell her it's going to be okay. And you don't have to turn everything off and check out all the time in order to survive. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Will you get her a tissue? Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's gonna. I don't know.
You can have it there. Yeah,
She's one of these guys. I'll replace it later. All right, we're good.
Well, we're not, but we're fine with it.
Yeah, everything's gravy. It's just crying is cathartic.
It is. So you don't have to turn it off. You can feel the only way to solve the problems, but to go through it, not around it.
Absolutely. And learning how to do that that's a journey in and of itself.
Yeah. So how do you? I would imagine that grief before, the way you dealt with it was by like hiding from it, by drinking, pills, getting out of yourself. I could be wrong, but
There was no dealing with it. I completely shut it off and just checked out, you know, until from the time I was 24 to the time I was 34. There was just always there were always substances. And it wasn't until 2021 that I was able to even start grieving my mother and my sister for real. Like it just wasn't, I wasn't processing it before.
What does processing look like now?
Uh, Lots of different things. And some things that might seem kind of silly, but like I keep a Spotify playlist that I've created. And I just put songs on it that my sister would love and is never going to get to hear. And that helps. Crying helps. Just crying and not, being super ashamed to cry. Oh boy. And suffering is something that I don't intentionally choose today. Oh, but I still choose it. And history has shown that I can sit with an incredible amount of pain before I do anything about it. I have this toolbox of things that I can use to like get better, and I'm just like, nah, fuck that toolbox. I'm gonna sit here and just feel sorry for myself. But I'm getting better about that.
You're coming up on 2 years, right? This year.
18 months in May.
Yeah, so you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you start active addiction, your brain stops kind of maturing at the rate that it normally would. And so when I'm roughly 17, I stopped kind of emotionally maturing. So this is like a real whirlwind, trying to learn how to navigate all this stuff and have some modicum of emotional intelligence to express in the world with adults who have grown normally, like normal people without addictions. I don't know the exact science behind it, but I know that it has to do with your central nervous system and just depressing it all the time, and your ability to process and feel emotion. Like my doctor explained it to me. He told me, he's like, look, up until like you have at least 2 years sobriety, your brain is still like majorly healing. He told me that I don't feel emotions the way a normal person does. And I haven't for such a long time, so I don't really know how to make that comparison. All I know is what I feel. I don't know what exactly is different from what someone who's never lived an active addiction is feeling, but God, that would be cool if I could. If I could just pop into somebody's brain for just a hot tick and just be like, what's it like to not be this fucked up all the time?
I can't say I don't know either. Damn. You were bartending when you got sober.
Mm-hmm.
Still in the industry. What was the most challenging part of choosing sobriety and becoming sober in the industry that you work in?
I'm sure that there were things that were difficult, and I'm might be not giving myself enough credit, but it's really weird. In my story, once I made that decision and that commitment to be sober, my triggers went away. I was never triggered like going back to work, like being around alcohol. And I lucked out, and the place I work has just been a godsend. It's been the most accepting and loving environment. Very. They follow my path. They keep up with me. They celebrate my sober birthdays with me. Everybody's really proud of me, and I lucked out in that regard for sure. I know.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So you had to tell them that you were sober, because before they probably, were encouraging of drinking. Like they didn't tell you not to drink, right?
I think it's a miracle that they were incredibly kind and gracious to allow me to keep working there, first of all. They, people in active addiction, I didn't make the best choices. I was completely unreliable, and for fuck's sake, I was having seizures at work where, you know, the paramedics had to come get me. Like that's just not okay. I mean, it wasn't at that point in time, it wasn't my fault because I was sick and I didn't know it.
So when you said, I'm going to get sober, at that point, people were like, we know you need to
Yeah,
get
it was one of their, like, I kind of had like this sit down when I came back, like this sit down with my two bosses, and they were like, without coming out and saying it, they were basically like needed me to tell them like I was taking the proper steps to recover. And I did tell them that, and they were like, okay, well, legally we weren't really supposed to ask you that, but we needed to to know that. I was like, yeah, guys, like, and they even they went so far as to kind of follow my mental health recovery as well, because as soon as I got into recovery for substance abuse, I started to tackle mental health issues as well, because I mean, those things always, almost always, in my experience, go hand in hand.
Yeah.
There's not just addiction ever. There are always, mental health issues. Yeah, and then there's so much work to be done after you. I mean, getting sober is hard, harder for some than others. But after you do that, then that's when the real work begins. I hated the first time somebody told me that after I got a year. This woman had the audacity to come up to me and tell me, now the real work starts. I was like, bitch, I just got a year. Can you just let me have this for a second? But she was right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was right. There's so much. You have to sober up for a while to even begin to tackle all of the other things that are going on.
Yeah. I was asking the questions about the support system at work because I think it's important for people to not suffer in silence. And, sometimes you're surprised by the support that you do get. So, in your case, it was very obvious there was a problem, but were you still surprised at how much support you got? Like, were you afraid to, like, even though, like, there was obvious signs and things happened, were you still afraid to, like, just go to your employers and say, I do indeed have a problem and I am sick?
So when I was in the hospital, it was November 19th. So it was until after the new year that I actually went in to meet with my bosses and talk to them. And I was like, there's not a universe where I'm not about to lose my job. But then I wasn't necessarily surprised by the support, but it definitely, it made me feel good and loved, and that wasn't something that because they weren't so willing to easily just dismiss me. It made me feel like I had worth to the company and to them as a human being. And that's exactly what I needed at that point in time. Because when you first start recovery, at least in my experience, I had zero self-worth, none. And so that was it was just a really cool thing that they did for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you avoid your coworkers or did you avoid going out with them at first? And do you still go out? What does that look like now?
I didn't avoid them. Like, there were a few times that we did hang out with each other, but we weren't really big partiers together. And I didn't avoid them because it wasn't really, we're like really close and tight knit, but we're close while we're at work and then we go home. That's just kind of the dynamic at my restaurant is just very different in the best way. As far as going out now, it's kind of, I'll be honest, it's been a struggle to get me out of the house sometimes. I always tell people it's like, this is the first time in my life it hasn't been a complete fucking nightmare to be inside my head. And so spending time by myself is kind of clutch. I like it. And I have cats that are the best. Just really leaning into that crazy cat lady situation. It's fine. It's kind of isolating, self-isolating, but in a healthy capacity. I didn't enjoy being alone before, but I oftentimes was because I couldn't drink the way that I drank in front of people. Like, they would have had me committed because it was complete insanity. going out, one thing about going out today is that though I enjoy it, especially live music, oh my God, it's like my first love. And I can't, my sensory overload happens very easily now. And I haven't quite gotten over that yet. Because without any sort of alcohol or drugs to numb like just everything that's going on, like how loud everything is, how many people, like people running into you, like that. So going out is kind of something that I am working towards being able to do more in the future, but currently am not really doing it unless it's like my favorite band or something. The amount that I was drinking before I even had interactions with people, to be able to have interactions with people, was wild. Like I remember there was a date that I went on and I crushed like 6 White Claws before I even met up with this person. What? It's just, it's kind of, I know it seems kind of like sick to laugh about this stuff, maybe to people that don't have active addiction, but if you have it, you get it. Like, it's just, you gotta laugh because it's wild. And it's just, it never has to be that way again. Those inspirational posters that were on the ceiling at the dentist's office growing up, those types of, well, and I know that they sound silly, but once you get it, you get it. And once you get it, you get it. And you're just like, oh shit, it just makes sense. And for me, like I am not a religious person in any way, shape, or form. To the average person, I would just, to make it simple, I'd be like, yeah, I'm agnostic, but I am agnostic, but also super spiritual now, which was something that I didn't have at all. And now it's like my spiritual connection to the world, like some days it's palpable, and that's when I'm like living in the flow. That's when I'm like, yeah, I can do this. This is worth it, Not every day's like that. I just went last October. I've just been struggling for months now, but with all these tools that I've been given from, people that got sober before I did, I didn't have to pick up a drink through any of it. And it was not, shit's hard. Getting sober doesn't mean that life is going to be easy. It means that you're going to wake up alive. That's all it guarantees you. It means you're not going to die from alcohol. That's it. It doesn't guarantee anything that's going to be easy. And when you get off that pink cloud after you first get sober, it's life slaps you in the face. I mean, fuck, there were 3 9-year-old children shot and killed yesterday. The world sucks. And some days I'm just like, whoa, I got sober for this? Like, this is some bullshit. But then you got to be like, all right, slow your roll. It's going to be, I'm here to make the world a little bit less shitty for the people in my immediate surroundings. That's it. That's all I can be in charge of most days.
Let's talk about dating. Like now, you talked about this White Claws and stuff. How is dating? What is that like sober?
Okay, so I thought about past relationships recently and have come to believe that I have had 2 healthy relationships in my entire life. And the reason my other relationships weren't healthy and they were, in fact, the exact opposite, incredibly toxic, usually with people that had, narcissistic personality disorder, was because I didn't love myself at all. And so, I was attracted to what I thought I was worth, which was nothing. So in active addiction, I didn't really date all that much. And in sobriety, I dated this one. I got online and was doing online dating for the very first time, which is a lot and terrifying. But I actually met this really cool guy. And we talked forever, and we dated for a few months, and I was comfortable being myself. Comfortable being my weird self without any booze, because that's learning how to be around people for the first time when you get sober it's intense. It's a lot. I was tired all the time, you know, just from emotional exertion. Um, but yeah, so dating him was a really cool experience. Um, you know, he was dealing with his own issues, so we kind of had to stop seeing each other. I'm still hoping he kind of comes around. Jack, if you're seeing this, call me. Um, Sex and sobriety. That's a real doozy as well, especially if you know, low self-esteem combined with my active addiction. Sex was not something that I did sober ever. Like, not since I was a teenager. And that's wild, you know, for an adult to not. So I was like, I was nervous, you know, like it's weird. Being vulnerable about like my situation and talking, like that's one thing, but being vulnerable, like in an intimate setting with another human being is still like, I'm getting clammy just talking about it. It has more, I don't know if clout is the right word I'm looking for, but it just means more, you know, it's not in active addiction. There was just so much senseless hooking up, like shit that I don't even remember, like most of it. Like, and I'm I don't want to say I'm embarrassed because I'm not, but you know, I mean, there like hundreds of hookups that I just don't remember. I mean, a lot of it is like questionable as hell because if I was blacked out and don't remember it, you probably shouldn't have been sleeping with me. You know, like that's kind of fucked up. But so like having that kind of be my frame of reference for sex in my adult life, and now I'm sober, and there's no. Funnily enough, I haven't had sex since I've been sober, but for one time, and that's because I have a friend who I'm close with. We go way back, and he's sober as well, and I was like, "Yo, can we just do this so I can like get it out of the way and know what it's like?" It was fine, but I don't know. I'm not. I'm working right now. I'm working on myself a lot, and I think dating's just not something that I'm interested in right now. I'm interested in having friends for sure, but dating, I could definitely leave it because I think that in order to have a truly healthy relationship, I have a lot more work to do on myself.
It's definitely something a sober person would say.